You don't let go, you return. You think you miss them, but what you really miss is the version of you that existed when they looked at you a certain way. And when that version disappears, you don't know who's left. So you chase, not the person, but the echo, the feeling, the place in your chest that once felt seen, and now feels silent. This isn't just heartbreak, this is a loss of direction, because love for many becomes orbit, and when the center vanishes, you spin. But the Stoics never spun. They stood, even in grief, even in absence, even in the long, quiet after. Because letting go was never about losing someone. It was about returning to the one thing they never took from you, yourself. Not the you that loved them, the you that stood before they arrived, and the one who can still stand now that they're gone. You're attached to a feeling, not a person. They're gone, but the pull stays. Why? Because what you miss isn't really them. It's the feeling you wrapped around their presence, a softness, a surge, a silence that didn't feel empty. They triggered it, but it came from you. And now that they're not here, the mind replays the moments like proof they were the source. They weren't. They were just the mirror. You fell in love with your own reflection when it finally looked like it mattered. So when they left, it felt like that image shattered. But the Stoic doesn't chase mirrors. He studies what's underneath. He knows attachment isn't love. It's a response to validation, to ego, to the way someone else let you avoid your own emptiness for just a little longer. So now you sit and the urge rises to text, to check, to remember. But pause. Ask, do you want them back? Or do you want that version of you that felt safe when they were around? Because if it's the latter, you don't need them. You need a return to the part of you that never needed proof to feel whole, and that part still here. Waiting for the noise to settle, the ego makes it louder. It's not just the heart that clings, it's the ego, the part of you that made them a trophy, a symbol, a story you could point to and say, see, I matter. So when they left, it wasn't just grief, it was insult. The ego doesn't mourn. It defends, loudly, violently, silently. It replays every memory with new edits, new meanings, new reasons to keep the pain alive. Because to the ego, pain is proof you cared. And if you cared, then what you had was real. But the Stoic knows, ego is noise, and the louder it gets, the less truth you can hear. So the practice is not to feel less, but to see more, to catch the moment when the mind turns the memory into a monument, and to whisper back, I don't need this to prove anything. Because love isn't proof, and loss isn't failure, they're just part of the motion. And your worth was never meant to be tied to whether someone else stayed. Cut that thread, gently, finally, not to win, but to become unmoved. Letting go, losing. You think if you let go, they win, you lose. The story ends with you alone and them ahead. But that's not truth. That's possession speaking. The part of you that thought keeping them was the same as keeping yourself. But people aren't prizes, they're mirrors. And when the reflection fades, you don't chase the glass, you rebuild the image. The Stoics knew this. Letting go isn't a step down, it's a return to center. Because sometimes, the highest form of power is walking away without collapse, without begging, without burning everything on the way out. Just leaving, clean, not because it didn't matter, but because you do. Letting go isn't losing them. It's losing the belief that you had to hold on to be whole. And the moment you lose that, you gain something deeper, clarity. That you loved, you tried, you felt everything. And now, you choose peace, not because it's easy, but because it's enough. Stop watching their sky. You say it's over, but you still watch. The stories, the updates, the silence, waiting for a sign, for regret, for them to notice that you're no longer there, but they don't look back. And even if they did, it wouldn't fix the part of you still looking out instead of in. The Stoics never begged for attention. They returned to attention, to what they could see, to what they could shape, to the sky above them, not someone else's weather. Because every time you check, every time you scroll, every time you hope, you give your center, to someone who already let it go. And the longer you orbit their world, the further you drift from your own. So stop watching, not to hurt them, but to heal you. Close the tab, mute the name, write the feeling, burn the attachment. Then, step outside, lift your eyes, and remember, you have a sky too. One that doesn't need permission to be bright again. Their value your worth. They were special, sharp, rare, and when they walked away, it felt like you lost that value too, like their absence took your worth with it. But that's the illusion, that someone else's presence is proof of your importance. It's not. The Stoic doesn't place identity in external favor. He holds it at the core, unshaken, unborrowed, because love given is not love owed, and rejection is not reduction. They can be brilliant and still walk away. You can be whole and still be left behind. The two truths can live together, but your worth, that stays. No matter who recognizes it, no matter who forgets, so stop using their silence as evidence. It proves nothing except they moved on. You can too. With grace, with stillness, with the quiet knowing that you never needed to be chosen to be enough. You were never theirs, you were always yours. You can love without clinging. They mattered, maybe still do, but love is not proof of attachment, and letting go is not denial. You can love someone and still walk away, not because you stopped feeling, but because you started seeing that love isn't control, it's clarity. That holding on doesn't preserve it, it just distorts it. The Stoic never feared love, he feared the kind that made him forget himself. So he chose to love like a flame behind glass, still warm, still bright, but contained. No smoke, no burn, no collapse. That's the art, loving without needing, caring without losing shape, missing without melting. So if they're still in your heart, let them be. But don't bend your life to keep their ghost comfortable. Love is still love, even when it's quiet, even when it doesn't chase, even when it no longer expects to be returned. You don't have to stop feeling, you just have to stop following. That's not cold, that's controlled. And the love that stays after you've let go, that's the kind you carry with dignity. Reclaim your center. You built your days around their patterns, their replies, their silences, their moods. Became your weather. And when they left, you didn't just lose them, you lost direction. Because your center was never anchored, it was tethered to a voice outside, to a presence you couldn't control. But the Stoic doesn't orbit, he rotates from within. His gravity isn't borrowed, it's built. So now, you rebuild, slowly, ruthlessly, like someone who finally understands that peace can't be outsourced. What time is yours? What space is sacred? What ritual brings you back? When the noise pulls you out, answer those and return. Even if it's awkward, even if you feel empty, even if the echo of them still sits in the corners, you don't need to erase them, you just need to stop spinning. Still your hands, still your thoughts, still your nervous reaching. And when the stillness feels uncomfortable, stay. Because that discomfort isn't loneliness, it's reclamation. And when it's done, you won't be centered on them. You'll be centered, period. You were whole before them, still are. Before they arrived, you laughed, you stood, you dreamed without asking if it was okay. You didn't wait to be chosen to feel alive. You were already whole, already enough, already yours. And then they came, beautiful, magnetic, loud in all the right places, and slowly your center leaned, not broken, just reoriented toward them, around them, through them. So when they left, it felt like something was missing. But the Stoic knows what leaves was never you. What breaks was never the core. You don't have to rebuild, you have to return to the version of you that wasn't waiting for reflection to recognize light, to the life that moved not for attention, but from intention. So pause, breathe, and remind yourself, you were never a half. You were a whole that temporarily forgot how much space it held. Now remember, and take that space back, not loudly, just completely. The ones who stay don't need to be held. Some people are not meant to be kept, only met, felt, released. They arrive like fire, teach like mirrors, leave like wind. You don't need to chase, You don't need to convince. The ones who stay don't need to be held. They hold themselves and meet you where stillness lives. So stop gripping the memory. Stop bending to prove that it mattered. It did. You did. Now let it breathe, not for closure, but for respect. The Stoic never buried love. He just stopped offering it to what no longer receives. So this time, let it go. Not like loss, but like wisdom. And keep walking, not colder, just cleaner.